Good morning, everyone. My name is Eugene Nicandri. I'm Chair of the Joint Authority and Canal Corporation Audit Committee. I'd like to welcome other members of the committee, the Chairman, John Canal, Trustees Tracy McGibbon, Dennis Trainer, and Michael Balboni. Trustee Anthony Pacenti has been excused from this Audit Committee meeting. I'd also like to welcome NIPA staff members who are present. This is a scheduled committee meeting which has been duly noticed as required by the open meetings law of the state of New York. We call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the adoption of the agenda that's been circulated. And unless someone has an amendment to the proposed agenda, I would ask for a motion to approve that agenda.
So moved.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The agenda is adopted. As is routine, our next item is to move into executive session briefly. If meeting will resume in open session in approximately 30 minutes. Unless someone has any objection, I'd ask for a motion to conduct an executive session to discuss financial and credit history of a particular corporation pursuant to 105F of the Public Officers Law of the State of New York.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We're going into executive session. Okay, we finished our executive session. I'd ask for a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I note for the record that no votes were taken during executive session. Next item is the discussion agenda, and for that I'd recognize Angela Gonzalez. Angela?
Good morning, trustees, NIPA staff, KPMG. I'd like to give you, I'm glad to be here this morning to give you an update on our 2020 internal audit plan, as well as a presentation on the 2021 audit plan and also for approval, and then also the 2021 internal audit budget for approval. So we'll start with the update on the 2020 audit plan. Going to the internal audit scorecard. Briefly, I'll go over some of the key metrics here on the operational side, the operational excellence side. So briefly, we're on audit plan percentage complete. We're at 92% at this point. We are on target to finish our whole plan by the end of the year. We have about 4 more reports to issue. And we've actually, a lot of it, we're in the green. We are meeting benchmark. Actually, we're a little bit lower on the benchmark for a project cycle. We are coming in on the average about 11 weeks or a week less than the benchmark. We're still tracking and looking and monitoring audit utilization, a little lower than the benchmark, but that's related to some time being worked on for strategic initiatives within internal audit transformation, particularly our GRC system, our QAIP program, and data analytics. And on the external quality assessment side, the assessment we had done by the IA last year for 2019, all those remediation items have been closed and completed. Any questions on these metrics for the operational excellence side?
Angela, in terms of utilization rate, I'll come back to it later, my annual discussion with you. So what was our targeted utilization rate for the year? I mean, I applaud the fact that you've been able to not only maintain but increase it to some extent in 2020 in spite of the COVID challenges, but what was our target for the year?
Well, we've been really tracking to around 65%. I mean, the benchmark is 75, but the average is really around 65%. That's what we've been really doing over the whole year.
Okay.
But what was our goal? What was our target? That's what we.
Our target is trying to get to the 75%. I want to get to the benchmark.
Okay. All right. Well, and so in terms, well, we'll come back to that later then. Okay.
I do want, while we're talking about operational excellence, and I don't know if now's a good time to ask it. One question I had generally is looking, we're all green, you've managed to complete the audits that you planned for the year. And so, if you could just sum up your view on, your comfort around being able to do the audit at the level that you needed to do, and that you were accustomed to doing, best practices in the, as we were in a pandemic, you feel comfortable that we've been able to do them at the level, there have been no significant delays. Can you just confirm that that's, that's sort of your view, the team's still been able to function even, when they've had to be remote, and there's been no, you haven't made any sacrifices in terms of getting these audits done that you had planned for the year? Because that's what I read this to say. Is that accurate?
That the
Yeah.
quality of the work hasn't been compromised.
Absolutely not. I mean, in the beginning, just getting our feet on the ground was a little difficult, but maybe the first month, because then we had to look at the plan again to make sure that what we had on it still made sense, and we did reevaluate the plan. I've been reporting that initially we started with 50 audits. We had to take about 15 off. We added 3 on because many projects were paused. Stakeholders were working on COVID response. But in terms of quality, I believe the team has really picked up in terms of executing audits. I believe that the quality is just as good as if we were in the office, quite honestly. So I think the team's done an excellent job in completing the plan. And I'm really satisfied with a lot of the recommendations that we've been making to management and working with them on that.
And I'm sure the ones that you delayed were, sort of risk-based, right? In terms of risk to the organization that you've delayed. And is the plan to then incorporate those in, in which we're going to go over your 2021 plan.
Yeah.
So those that were the 13 that you listed that were delayed, the plan is to take those up next year, but they weren't ones that you thought you were sacrificing any, sort of.
No, absolutely.
Organization.
Absolutely not. No. Yes, and many, not all 13 made it back to the plan. Some of them we incorporated in scopes of audits this year, but 8 of them made it to the 2021 plan.
All right, thanks.
Angela, building on that, so on the percentage of high-risk observations identified,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that doubled from the historic rate, 12, 14% to 24%, what's my takeaway there? What do I conclude from that? What do you conclude from that?
What I conclude from that is that, we've had a little uptick in some needs improvements opinions, and that was related to some new audit areas that we haven't audited in the past. So that's contributed to the uptick in the high rated. So new areas of audits that we haven't uncovered and looked at controls for.
And the fact that what looks to be 17 out of your 19 high-risk observations have yet to be implemented, should that be a point of concern for us?
No, because they're due after November 15th. So what I want to tell you here on the value and impact, so all the 2018s are complete. They're all remediated and closed. The 2019, we only have 5 left that have to be implemented. There are a few that are due by the end of this year and a couple due in Q1. And they're tracking on time to be closed on time. And then we're just, management starting to work on the 2020. So they made a lot of good progress in addressing the open recommendations.
You lost me on excuse me. So the current year high recommendations of 17 that are due after 11/15, you're saying that's now down to 5?
No, altogether we have right now, if you look at the high recommendations, it says total 90, and what's been implemented to due date is 85. So we have 5 left, right? The 17 out of 19, those are the ones that have been extended. So there's only 2 left that have to be closed that have been extended.
Well, it always concerns me when high risk issues are being extended as opposed to addressed on a timely basis. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Oh, okay. This just says observation.
In the conversation we just had in terms of our overall attentiveness organizationally to internal controls. I just want to ensure that the organization is responding on a timely basis and giving due priority to the high risk observations and cleanup that's needed.
Yeah, and they are, because it says the percentage of high-risk observations implemented has been 100%.
But that's 2 out of 2.
Right, and then the rest, there's one due.
Worried about the 17.
Well, 17 have been implemented, there's 2 left.
I guess I'm not following. It looks like 2 out of 2 were implemented and 17 have yet to be implemented, but
2019.
2019, these are 2019s.
I'm in 2020.
Oh, you're looking at 20, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. So 17 are due after November 15th, but they'll be due throughout 2021, right?
Well, I'm always
2020.
pushing on pace. If there's a high risk exposure, I'm not a big fan of giving everybody a year or more to clean it up. I mean,
Agreed.
it can't be that high a risk. So I'm just trying to better understand the required pace to address high risk issues and concerns.
I think Angeles wants to know why these are going into next year. Are they work in progress or
Well,
not
they were
working fast
they were identified in 2020, so that's why they'll be implemented in 2021. So that's like the normal progress. Usually we find not everything we identify in the same year gets implemented. Several of them go into the year after, right? And it also depends on, sometimes a lot with high recommendations, we have short-term, long-term plans, right?
Apologies, don't want to get lost. If my toilet's overflowing, that's a high risk issue. And I'm identifying it in my audit that I got a toilet that's overflowing. I want it remedied now. I don't want it cleaned up next year because now I have to endure months of my toilet overflowing. So put a bad metaphor. I'm trying to get at that point. It doesn't help me to know that next year we'll address the high risk concerns we've identified this year. I want to ensure the high risk concerns you've identified this year have been addressed. So they're no longer high risk next year.
Well, some of these are recent high rated as well. They didn't just happen like in January. They happened within the last month or 2. So they will be addressed within probably Q1, Q2.
And to that point, I think what would be helpful for us to understand, because I agree with the chair that what we don't want is to leave where you've said they're high risk. High risk items need the most and the quickest attention. Otherwise, they're not high risk. And so, assuming that we're labeling correctly, maybe if we can get an indication of, are they 30, whether, it's within 30 days, 60 days, so we can know how quickly these are being resolved. Or, or some way of letting us know this was an audit that you just did last month, right? And so it will go into 21 because you just did it. So we can't read whether this is an audit, a high risk audit that was done in January of this year or last month. And it's very different, a high risk audit that was done in January of this year that will go into 21, as opposed to an audit that was done and you concluded it was high risk last month. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I understand, but I know when, the monthly reports that I send out to you give that information. So when you see December's report, January's report, you'll see what highs are due 30, 60, 90 days. They're just not reported here on the scorecard.
Got it. Okay.
Well, I'll continue to go on record that we organizationally need to pick up the pace. You don't need to issue an audit report for someone to know that you've identified a high risk issue. I'm assuming that's identified real time in the course of the audit. So, and I'm assuming organizationally, going back to the conversation we just had, the organizational attentiveness to enhancing the overarching control environment is of the highest priority. So again, if stuff happens because we haven't remedied high risk exposures, that's a risk I'm not willing to take. And to me, it's just not acceptable. So we need, and this is more for Gil and the team than it is for you, but I want to ensure that we're appropriately prioritizing curing high-risk exposures and issues and concerns. So I appreciate the information you send us, but I don't want to lose sight of the forest for the trees in terms of level of detail versus just the assurance that organizationally we're appropriately responding to the high-risk exposures that have been identified, in particular when that number's meaningfully increased, at least on a percentage basis.
Angela, can I suggest that maybe that, going forward, when we have our year-end audit like this, audit committee meeting, that you kind of provide us with a tracking mechanism. So if at this time of year, we can look at anything that's going to roll over into the following year. We can look here at this time of the year when it was identified as a high risk item and when it's going to be projected to be completed, so that we can make a judgment that it's moving fast enough or slow enough to call to our attention. Okay.
Or maybe we'll take another look at the metrics here and see what kind of metric we could add to the scorecard to give you that information.
Well, I think I heard what the chairman said, and rest assured,
I understand.
rest assured, we heard you. And I think what's going to help is that for the high risk observations that we have a proposed accelerated schedule to remedy, that we agree with you, Angela, and we provide that to the board so that they have clarity that we are on top of this high risk, that we are, not just kind of letting it go through the normal process. If there's high risk, meaning we gotta be on top of them on an accelerated basis. So we should have an agreed remediation schedule for high risk, and that should be visible to the audit committee.
Thank you.
Understood.
Yeah,
All
that
right.
was perfect.
Thank you. Okay, just couple other slides I just want to highlight in this deck. If you could go turn to the 2020 audit plan status. This is just giving you a little more detail on where we are with the plan. Like I mentioned, to 92%. So we've issued 35 audit reports so far. We have a few more to go. They'll be issued within the next 2 weeks. These pie charts here is a breakdown of by audit phase, report ratings, and then a percentage of audit deliverables. As you can see, as I mentioned, a little bit of an uptick in the needs improvements. You see that percentage a little higher. So out of the 9 so far, 6 of them were brand new audits we haven't uncovered, haven't done any control workarounds, and that I guess led to the needs improvement opinions. So.
Angela, tell us again why almost half of the reports have no opinion.
Because they're assessments or advisory.
And when we assess, we don't have an opinion of what we've assessed?
No, well, we have a conclusion, but we don't have a rated opinion. So
Right.
Right.
So on that, Angela, because I do think we need to be careful about, what's advisory as opposed to what's a true audit. And I know in other situations where that's been a concern, because what we want businesses to be able to do is to act on areas of concern. And advisory, opinion isn't the same thing as an audit report, right? And so, and can you share with us what's a healthy mix? Should we be 50-50, audit, a traditional audit, and 50%, opinions or advisory? Is that a healthy place to be?
Well, I mean, we have an internal target where we want to, at a minimum, have 50% of our audits to have an opinion. We always go over that. In terms of benchmarking, for internal benchmarking. I believe, at least 3/4, almost 3/4 of your audit should have an opinion. And it depends on the year too, like and what areas we're looking at. If there's new programs coming in, new controls being designed, we're going to assess and not actually audit, but we'll come back in another prior year or another future year and do an audit once they've built the controls. On an advisory capacity, it's like they're starting from scratch and they just want to have an objective eye, and there's no opinion to that either. But I would say a balance would be a good mix of audit between audits, assessments, and advisory. The majority of your plan should be audits.
Right.
And that's where we've been trending over the last few years. We're doing less and less assessments and advisory.
And your goal is to, I think I heard you say in there somewhere that it should be about 3/4 should be traditional audit.
Getting close
As
to
opposed to advisory. Okay.
Yeah, I know we've been in the 60-70%, over the last few years around that benchmark. But we've internally benchmarked it at 50%, to be at least have opinions for the mix of audits.
But what I'm trying to get is what's best practices, as opposed to what, if best practices, which I don't think it's 50-50, but I think I heard you say that the goal is to get, what best practices would be about 3/4 are traditional audits. And then, 1/4 of that is advisory work. And that's where we tried to get.
Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That's about around the best practices between, almost 3/4 of your plan should be audits, but every organization is different, and it all depends on their business needs, how they manage their programs, how they manage their controls. So that's why we created an internal benchmark for us, because it is really so different by organization.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so if we can just skip over Appendix B, that is just a breakdown of the audit plan. I just want to highlight some of our transformation accomplishments. Just two things I really want to highlight here. One on this slide and one on the next slide is our GRC automation. So all our projects from Q2 on have been executed in GRC. All our entities are in the audit universe, and we've actually created the audit plan from the system. The other piece we're working on right now is the observation management module, which is in user acceptance testing, and we're looking to be in production by January. Once that system is in place, we'll no longer be using SharePoint to track open recommendations and reporting. We'll be using the GRC system. So looking forward to that. The other accomplishment that I do want to talk about is related to if you go to the next slide, is the quality assurance improvement program. So I mentioned we've reached 100% remediation for 2019. And as part of the QAIP program, we are required to do our own internal assessment of the standards. And we did do that. And if you go a couple of slides down is the summary of all the standards. We are generally conformed. It means we comply with the standards according to the review that the QAIP team did. A couple of improvements that we need to make is related to maturity of data analytics, and then just documenting my review, my approval of when a report goes out into the GRC system. We keep those emails, we just haven't migrated them to the system yet. The other piece I do have to mention here is the required communications checklist is the listing of standards that I have to report to the audit committee as per standard, and that's also in the next couple of slides. Other than that, these are really the only two key things I wanted to highlight on the key transformation accomplishments. I don't know if there's any other questions you may have on any other of the items that I noted here.
I was just going to say our record on the QAIP is very impressive. So kudos to the team.
Thank you.
And in terms of team, we talk, every year regularly about your ability to have a full team. Can you give us a quick update on where you stand? I saw in your analysis you're assuming for planning purposes you'll have all open positions filled by the end of January.
Mm-hmm.
How many open positions are there? How many team members do you have at this point?
Well, we're still at 19. We have 3 open positions, actively recruiting. We're looking to make an offer for 1, and we are interviewing a couple of other candidates for the 2 other positions. So we're making really good headway there. I think we're good on the staffing side.
19 as we speak, and you're recruiting to fill 3.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep.
And has that been a constant open 3? I mean,
Yeah.
for the year, what's your FTEs been for the year? Have you had pretty much a full team for the year? Or
Yes.
you've been running with 19 or 18 for the year?
We've been running around 19 for most of the year.
Okay. So are you having trouble attracting the talent that you need to have a full team? I mean, if you're running 19 and targets 22, I'm just trying to understand, our continuing recruiting challenge or what it is that precludes us from having a full roster.
No, well, it's because positions were put on hold for a little while. So we weren't able to start recruiting and posting positions. So that's why we're still recruiting now. They weren't posted for, I think they started in October to get posted.
Got it.
Angela, are you expecting any pushback when time comes, hopefully soon, when people can go back to the office and work from the office, if that's the plan, and some people not able to do that? You got any feel for how that would work in your department?
I haven't had any pushback about going into the office. I mean, I think the team is doing well remotely. Some of my team has been going in once a week, or when they need to go in, but they've adapted pretty well to the remote, and we've been able to, execute our work. So no real pushback on, when they're just waiting. We're in alliance with what the protocols are, and we're doing well remotely.
Good. Anything
Okay.
else?
Any other questions on the 2020 plan? Okay, if not, I'd like to get into the 2021 plan. Just wait for Danielle to get those slides up. Okay, if you could go to the slide where it says executive summary. Okay, so basically the 2021 plan it's been fully developed, and it reflects several different components here. It's based on a defined and risk scored audit universe, which is aligned to business units. Audit projects in the plan are a subset of the audit universe entities that are based on audit risk ranking, last audit, internal audit resource. The plan aligns to top enterprise risks and NIPA's current core priorities and foundational pillars. The plan will be evaluated every quarter to address any emerging risks and give that appropriate consideration, and it'll be adjusted as business needs change. We've obtained several inputs from executive management, risk management, and the various business units across the organization. And overall, so the internal audit is requesting that the audit committee will approve the 2021 NIPA and Canal Corporation internal audit plan. So if we could just go to the next slide. This is basically our risk assessment process, which has not changed over the last few years. We're still obtaining internal inputs that are listed here. Key stakeholder input is vital to obtaining risk assessment information and just business information. So we've done about 81 interviews across the organization. We look at external inputs. So Gartner puts out 2020 hot spots in terms of risk each year. We do internal benchmarking with Gartner Audit Leadership Council. We have 57 audit entities in our universe. That has not changed. Some of the names have changed, and we've combined some departments, but other than that, we still have 57. We've updated our risk scoring model, and all our audit entities are in GRC. The plan comes out to 38 NIPA and 5 Canal audits. And then, but we're like I mentioned, we've been doing 45 to 50 audits on the average every year. We're coming out a little bit less this year because we want to increase the quality with using more data analytics as opposed to going out and doing more quantity. And it's also, the plan will be, somewhat COVID dependent, depending on what happens with the situation with returning back to work and how it'll affect the organization. So if we can go to if any questions if there's no question on this, I'd like to go to the next slide. Briefly on the audit universe, this hasn't really changed either, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. So mentioned this, like I said, 57 entities. This is how they're broken down between NIPA and Canal's high, medium, and low rated on our audit universe cycle. We've been focusing mostly on the high rated and medium rated audit entities. The low rated entities we review them on an as needed basis or as business risks or needs change. In Appendix A is a listing of all the audit universe entities by risk ranking, and it shows you the last year audited. And you can see that we have touched every single high rated entity and the majority of the mediums and even some of the lows. So we're really in cycle as much as possible, because the lows are, like I said, on an as needed basis, but we really have covered the majority of all our entities in the universe. Any questions there?
Angela, majority is 51%. Are we higher than that?
Oh, yes. I didn't realize that maybe majority is not the right word, but no, yes, we've covered way more than that. Yes. All the highs, most of the mediums, the mediums that have not been covered were just because other medium rated entities just took priority. So we do have the ones that we haven't looked at on our radar, or we may just combine them into other entities, so they won't be a separate entity and they'll get coverage. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. This is the proposed 2021 audit plan coverage. As I said, 38 projects on the NIPA side. It's broken down between audits, assessments, and advisory. 82% of our plan are audits. And as you can see, the comparison year over year, most of our plan are audits and not advisory and assessments. It's based on filling our positions, the open positions, by the end of January. Co-source hours have been allotted. Most of those audits or audit hours are for IT audits. The number of audit projects are based on data that we've collected, timekeeping data throughout the year. In 2020, we found that our audits were taking a little bit longer than they would in 2019. So the average is around 475 hours. And the reason for that is because we've done more fieldwork testing, we've done more analytics, more observation analysis, and just getting management agreement and developing action plans and assisting management with that. So on the average now, our plan is based on 525 hours per audit project, give or take, some are more or less. We added 50 more hours for data analytics. And our plan is total hours is 18,700 for both NIPA and Canals. Our capacity is at 18,690, which is an Appendix C. It's just a rounding number there. We've also allotted 1,000 hours for contingency, where we can, every year we get requests, at least 2 to 3 year on special requests for management. So we've allotted some hours for that. Any questions on the coverage? Okay, on the next slide, the Canal coverage is basically the same, so I don't need to go into a lot of detail here. 5 projects, 4 audits, and 1 is an assessment. So then we can just go over to the next slide, where this is the audit plan resource and audit type allocation. This is on the NIPA side, broken down between business and technology, internal staff hours, and then budgeted third party. As you can see, there's like 2,900 hours for technology hours that we'll need from our co-source, minimal on the subject matter expertise hours. The other thing I want to highlight here is just the comparison of business technology integrated type breakdown between 2020 and 2021. We have a little bit of increase in the integrated. We've been doing more integrated audits every year, because when we find and we do the business processes, we really need to take a look at the technology controls to get a full picture of the control environment for that business process. Any questions there? All right. If not, let's go to the Canal Corporation resource and audit type allocations. Basically the same information. We have dedicated staff that work on Canal's audits now for the last year. We have 5 audits. 3 are on the operations support side for asset management, post-retirement benefits, and post-integration activities, as well as 2 for technology audits for a system implementation and then an application review. We go to the next slide. This is the breakdown of the risk category allocation, comparing NIPA year over year between 2020 and 2021, and then Canals as well. As you can see, there's not much of a difference between the NIPA between 2020 and 2021 in terms of risk allocation. Most of our majority of our plan is touching operational risk, and that's due to supporting utility operations and the ISO 55000 standards. We have to cover specific categories of audit areas within utility operations. We're going to do a little bit more on the human resources side in terms of workforce planning, and then also covering technology for digitization. And then for Canals, a little less operational because we're doing a little bit more technology for Canals. Any questions on the risk allocation? Okay, so then we can go right into the audit plan alignment. So on the NIPA side, 87% of the projects in the plan are aligned to a strategic core priority, a foundational pillar, or a top risk. You can see the concentration here is in resource alignment and digital transformation. And on the enterprise risk, we're doing some concentration on attract and retain qualified workforce, critical infrastructure, and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, we always have a good concentration on. We kind of touch that every single year, as well as critical infrastructure too. Any questions here? The list of the actual projects are in Appendix D.
Yeah, Angela, 2 questions. Yeah. Can you help me understand what's our natural gas audit? I see we're not doing it, but what does that entail? Is my first question.
Okay. I think this is the natural gas is the strategic core priority. That's and this is a new, I guess this is a new strategic, that's part of our new strategy. So
hey, Angela, do you mind if Angela, may I chime in? Hi, trustee. This is Eve. This is Eve. No, that you've got it correct. So this is part of one of our strategic initiative around decarbonizing our natural gas plants. And it's abbreviated here in the title. So it's purely, we've got 5 strategic initiatives that I'll talk about a little bit later on. And it's just ensuring that our audit plan is tied to our Vision 2030. That makes sense.
Yeah, so it means that 0 could go to a number. You just don't have it yet as you continue to work.
Not yet. Right.
So that was my first question. My other, and I think it's very important that we align the audit to our strategic. So that's very good.
Before we move on, Tracy, let me just clarify. So why are those NA? Why is alignment not applicable?
Where does it say NA? Oh, you mean in for Canals? On the Canals, the next slide?
I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry, my bad. Okay.
Yeah. So then my other question is on this slide is enterprise resilience, does that include business continuity? Just for clarification. Okay.
It does.
Good. And I want to commend that I see that we've got DE&I as and actually, again, being consistent that we're holding, that there is accountability here. So I was very pleased to see that. So.
Yeah, we're actually going to be doing that in an advisory capacity since it's such a brand new program, and later in 2021 to get the program up and running. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But again, it's just consistent with holding people accountable. It's very important. Thank you.
And how does your talent today line up here, Angela? Does your team have the skills and do you have the right mix of talent that does align with our key objectives and strategic pillars going forward? Or is there a pivot or an evolution that your team needs to make or you need to make with your team?
I always think, I always think that the internal audit is learning, and we can always learn more about the business. So throughout the year, we will have different types of trainings to learn more about, say, some of these strategic initiatives. And I have staff that have been with us less than 5 years. I have staff that have been with us for 10 years. So I do have some good staff that understand the utility industry business. But like I said, we'll continue, and that's one of the things we're going to be working on is talent management this year, in terms of getting the right training specific to learning more of where we're moving as an organization, and within the industry, moving towards becoming more green, and then aligning with state goals.
Okay, I just want to ensure that you feel you've got the resources you need to match up against where we are or where we're going as an organization. So,
Yeah. So,
okay.
okay. So if we can go to the next slide. This is the canal. This is for canals alignment. So, I mean, it's NA, because I don't believe any of these strategic core priorities map up to canals, other than some of the foundational pillars do. And what I've mapped out here is the projects that are where I could map up as close as possible to a core priority or foundational pillar, and they have their own set of top enterprise risks. That's why that's the NA is there.
Just be careful as the reimagine the canals evolves. I would think there'd be an alignment there.
Well, that's under the NIPA plan, because NIPA is executing that project. I didn't put it under the canals plan.
Okay, well, we'll come back to, I mean, just stay tuned there. I mean, it's canals, it's one. There aren't two canals initiatives.
Agreed.
It's canals. So the canals are being reimagined. So let's be careful that we don't unbundle old canals and new canals. There's only one canal. So, okay.
Will do. Okay, no further questions there. I just briefly want to go over the internal audit strategy refresh. If we can just get to the next slide. Okay, so I know I've been reporting to the audit committee over the last few years on our strategy, our initiatives, and most of them have been substantially operationalized at this point. They really focused on process and automation. So to continue moving internal audit on the path of being better and more efficient, we did some evaluation of maturity, where we are on a maturity perspective, a current state as to where we want to move to, through the Gartner Audit Leadership Council. We did conduct some strategy sessions ourselves, and we came up with these 3 areas that we still want to focus on, and that's optimization of Agile and GRC, our data analytics strategy, and then our talent management strategy, which I just mentioned a little bit earlier. The next slides are just the roadmaps. I don't know if there's anything in particular you want me to focus or talk about here, because it's just a high-level roadmap of where we're moving for optimization for both Agile and GRC. Any particular questions, or do you want me to just talk to these a little bit? Or okay.
I mean, we've reviewed them. Anything you want to highlight or pull out?
Yeah, no, it's just for I guess Agile and GRC, it's really a more optimization of what, enhancing what we already have. Our methodology, looking for enterprise-wide tools to manage the portfolio. That's our audit plan. Adding Agile concepts to other areas in the audit, like risk assessment, looking to see what other KPIs we can potentially track. And then continuous improvement is part of Agile. On the GRC side, just really enhancing our reporting and dashboarding. Because now in 2020, we'll have the full complement of all our audits in the system. Now we can really pull reports and really use the dashboards that are built into GRC. And then just continue to enhance our own training. If we can just go to the next slide briefly on the data analytics strategy. So that's been on hold because we've been waiting to get a tool. That was a little on hold too this year because of COVID, so we didn't start really moving on that until Q3. Right now, we're in bid evaluation for a tool. We're looking to have that in production hopefully by February, because we have to still go to contract. And what that is going to do for us, and we're taking a whole review of the whole strategy, looking at the vision, where what kind of initiatives we need to do for training, what type of competencies we're looking for, updating our process. So the goal is, once we get this tool in place, we're actually an implementer is going to help us start developing some of these continuous auditing pilots. We have a list of ones that we want to do. We will be building it with the new tool. Also working with IT governance on pulling the data, and then once we can prove that yes, we can build these repeatable scripts, the goal is in 2022 to start handing them off to the business for continuous monitoring. That's what we want, and so this is the area that we need to mature in, and that's one of our goals, is to have that happen over the 2021 year. Last but not least, and then is the talent management strategy roadmap. So it's also enhancing. We've had components of talent management we've been doing, but now this kind of strategy brings it all together. Enhancing our competency model. We already have one. We want to be able to take another look at it, make sure that we have the right competencies in there. Working with HR to do that. Enhancing performance management in terms of our performance evaluations. Enhancing our learning and development. That's the training and development program we already have in place. Work with HR on the competencies to update our job descriptions. And then, developing some kind of rewards for, people that are doing a really great job. And then creating a real career mobility path, a career path. I mean, in our competency model, you can see from auditor to director what it takes, what the competencies are expected, but that's not a true career path. That we will be heavily working with HR to accomplish that. And that's basically the strategy for those three areas that I spoke about. If there are no other questions here, I would like to request that the audit committee approve the 2021 audit plan.
Any other questions for Angela on any of this?
Yeah, Angela, can I just go back to, flip me back to slide 43. If you can throw that up, Daniela. Just on my utilization question, trying to understand the benchmark. So you had us at 67% for the year. So is that 67% of what you define as total available time as opposed to total time?
Well, that 67% is through the end of, through like mid-November. We don't have the rest of December in there.
I understand. Just looking at the metrics.
But what that utilization is exclusively for audit work only. And that includes working on audits, that includes, closing recommendations, that includes any client support work that we do. It's not just the specific, actual executing the audit. It encompasses a couple of other, including other hours that we use that we consider audit work. Risk assessment work, risk assessment hours we include in utilization as well.
Okay. So Daniela, I'm on page 67 of our deck here. It's slide number 43. But so I'm just trying to, my simple ballpark, I think I try to get at this every year. So if you've got 21 FTEs in your plan, round numbers, 2,000 hours per FTE, and we've got north of 40,000 available hours. So if we're utilization 67%, that would imply to me we'd have 30,000 hours that we're utilizing for audit work. The plan is less than 19,000. So I'm just trying to understand not only the math, but just back to benchmarking as to what our benchmark should be. You said it's 75%. So if we've got 20 people, 2,000 hours a year, simple math, that's 40,000 hours. If we're 75% utilized, that'd be 30,000 hours in terms of audit work. Well, the audit plan only calls for 19,000. So I'm just trying to understand how we think of utilization Or is my thinking that flawed from a traditional benchmarking standpoint?
Well, I mean, you were saying 2,000 hours a person, but we take out all the vacation time, training, all those hours, and that's why we get down to
Yeah,
the
I understand.
18,700.
Yeah, I understand how you get there. I'm just trying to understand back to the benchmark. So there's 18,700 of hours for 40,000 plus that's available to us. I'm just trying to understand how the benchmarking is evaluated there. Because it always strikes me as lower than it at least could be. But I don't want to be unduly harsh if my expectations are just misguided here. So,
Well, the other thing I do want to add, so the co-source hours that we use, we can't add into utilization because they're not our hours.
I get that. Yep, I understand.
So that also contributes to the percentage being a little lower, right? Because if that was just regular staff hours, it would increase.
I'll circle back on it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So Judge
Any other
asked for
question?
motion to approve the plan. I'll move it.
Move, is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item is audit plan and strategy year end to year end. Ask Scott Heiser from KPMG to.
Judge, I have one other item, the budget for just one page.
Oh,
There
I'm
was
sorry,
another-
Andy. Yeah.
Sorry
okay.
about that. Because so pursuant to the IA standard 2020, the audit committee has to approve our budget, and
Yep.
it's just a one pager. So overall, our budget really hasn't changed between 2020 and 2021. I mean, less cost was spent in 2020 because of less training, less travel for audit, and less expenses overall. But if there are any real questions related to this, I'm requesting the audit committee to approve the 2021 budget for internal audit as well.
Who are we using for that $1,350,000?
That's Deloitte. So but it includes Deloitte, it includes D&M that they do we outsource the recharge and Western New York audits too, the compliance audits. That includes that numbers in there. That's economic job development commitment. And then
Is the bulk of it Deloitte?
it is. The bulk of it's Deloitte.
Okay. And you're comfortable, obviously you're bringing it forward. This is an adequate budget to enable you to successfully execute at least the plan you've put forward.
Agreed. Yes, I'm comfortable with the budget.
All right, I'll move it.
Second.
Any questions? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now we'll go to Scott Heiser.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Good morning, everyone. This is Scott. I apologize. I'm on the call because for whatever reason, our technology somewhat conflicts with Zoom sometimes. So did not want to drop off. I also, on the phone with me today is just Christopher DeVenzo, who's our lead manager on the account. You may recall, he was our lead manager last year as well. We prepared, I believe you have them already, a brief slide deck with some of our required communications and so forth. Like that, Chris will kind of highlight some of the key items for you quickly. I don't think there's not too many new things. I wanted to maybe just highlight a few things, and then I'll let Chris go through the slides, and then obviously we can talk through any questions either during the session or after we're complete, whatever is appropriate for you all. But just high level, all good news from a team continuity. You'll see from a team continuity standpoint, our team is overall the same. We don't have any significant turnover. You'll see we do have another manager who's helping Chris this year, who's an industry manager that works with me on a few other accounts. You may recall Grace Ketchigan, who's been on the account for got back to my first tenure on the account, probably about 10 years. She's kind of timed out, but she is helping us similar to her role last year, behind the scenes, both because of her knowledge of obviously of NIPA and her GASB expertise. She's kind of staying on for one more year just to kind of make sure that basically the transition and there's nothing slips through the cracks. So she's not on here, but she is still helping us again for at least the 2020 audit. But from an overall standpoint, I think we're in a very good spot. I think from my standpoint, the communication with Sandeep and Adam and his team has been great. I mean, we all kind of started around the same time last year, my first year back, and then with Adam and Sandeep starting their new roles. So from my standpoint, that communication has been very good and enabled us to do a few things, which we'll touch on here. One is, I think you'll see from our timeline and plan, we this year have been, I'd say, aggressive to move up a lot more work than we've done historically, for a couple of reasons. One, I think it provides a better product and a better audit. It was much earlier than to take some of that compression and pressure off the February, March timeframe. So I think that's one big thing you'll see we'll touch on. And that's really been driven by our team and the cooperation of Sandeep and Adam's team to be open to making some of those changes and doing more work here in the October, November, December time periods. And then the other, I think, thing obviously want to mention is obviously with COVID impacts. I don't think it's going to have drastic changes per se in the accounts that we perform procedures on, but it's obviously had on this company and many of our clients throughout the industry a lot more effort that's been done more on risk assessment and planning and maybe digging into a few things like, for example, like I'll give just a couple like because of pricing and because of costs that have been incurred, make sure we understand those costs and the nature of the costs and how they're being recorded, customer receivables and, potential issues with receivables and not necessarily at NIPA, but more general. So the COVID impact's really kind of been a lot more planning and risk assessment, and that will continue on our part. But at this point, there's no, I would say, significant changes to the accounts or the approach, but that will continue. And if there is something that would all be altered or changed, obviously we would communicate that not only to management, but then in our findings when we report back to the audit committee in March. So I guess I'll pause there. I was going to turn over to Chris. He'll kind of highlight some of the key items from the planning perspective, but I think for overall, I feel we're in a really good spot in light of the fact that we're working in a remote environment. And I feel, we're definitely kind of ahead somewhat in some aspects where we've been historically at this point in the year with our audit work. So I'll pause there if there's any questions of the committee before I turn over to Chris to highlight some of the slides.
I've got nothing now, Scott.
Go ahead, Scott, then.
Judge.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Jan. Chris, you want to go through a couple highlights on some of the slides?
Yep. Thanks, Scott. So I'm looking at slide 1, starting here. I know Scott kind of touched upon this, but our client service team this year is very consistent, as you'll see with the boxes highlighted in purple. We have continuity at all levels. And then the addition of Kelvin, who's an audit manager who will be assisting myself and the audit staff on a day-to-day basis in performing the audit. So moving to the next slide, this slide is just our commitment to you, delivering an exceptional client experience. Our focus is on audit quality, delivering thoughtful and coordinated and a transparent approach, being productive in our audit and the design execution, and providing industry insights into any audit or business topics. So skipping ahead to slide 4, which is the COVID-19 resilience and readiness. As Scott mentioned, the impact of COVID-19 is definitely applicable to our audit. And as we move along, and we've started already in our planning process, but we'll be gaining understanding of the impact it's had not only on the results of the financial statements, but as well as the impact to any business processes. For example, if management used to have manual sign-offs, in the office, we'll be looking for any changes to that process. For example, now remote sign-offs on reconciliations and things like that. And obviously we've conducted some of this risk assessment and planning related to COVID, but it'll be a continuous effort throughout our audit during this year. So moving to the next section, this is some of our required audit committee communications. So I will kind of skip through a few of these slides, but turning to the next one, the scope of the audit. We are conducting an audit of the consolidated financial statements of New York Power Authority as of and for the year ended December 31st, 2020. Our reporting deliverables this year are consistent with the prior year. We will be delivering an audit opinion, a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with other matters, as well as an investment compliance report on investment activity, ensuring they are within guidelines. Skipping ahead a couple of slides to slide 8, which is our audit timeline. So as Scott mentioned previously, a lot of the first 4 to 6 months of this year have been working with management, debriefing on the prior year audit, and coming up with ways to improve the audit process, as well as meeting with management to discuss key issues and updates during the current year for anything going on at NYPA. In the interim time period, which is our September through December time period, which we are currently working through now, we are performing process walkthroughs to gain an understanding of key processes at NYPA, as well as evaluating the design and implementation of controls and performing interim substantive audit procedures. And as we move into year end, we'll obviously be performing any remaining audit procedures, evaluating the results of those audit procedures, reviewing financial statements and disclosures, and we will be meeting with you again to present those audit results. And consistent with prior years, our filing date is expected middle to late March, prior to March 31st, 2021. Moving to the next slide, just wanted to touch upon some of the audit improvements that Scott had mentioned earlier. Our biggest change and improvement is the timing of audit. As Scott mentioned, our goal is to improve our audit quality and reduce some of the compression of the procedures that we perform at year end and moving them up into this interim period of October through December. So from prior years, we have increased the amount of time we've spent working on some field work during October through December. Our focus has been on testing high volume accounts, including revenue, expenses, and capital assets. And we are currently going through the process of performing walkthroughs, gaining an understanding of the key processes, as well as any COVID impacts, as we mentioned before. And along with our audit improvements, Adam, Sandeep, and team have done a great job working with us and providing PBCs earlier than they have historically to help us execute on our plan. And they've worked to coordinate some key contacts in the remote work environment and facilitate conversations. So they've been a big help in getting our improvements implemented. Moving to the next slide, the risk assessment, significant risks. So we have one significant risk identified, which is a risk of fraud related to management override of controls. This risk is present at all entities. And in response, KPMG will be assessing the design and implementation and operating effectiveness of journal entry controls with an emphasis on period end and post-closing entries. Moving to the next slide, this slide highlights some of our estimates and other significant audit areas. We have one significant estimate we've identified related to pension and OPEB at NIPA and Canals. And really the factor and the work around there will be around the measurement uncertainty of assumptions utilized in that valuation. And then just quickly to highlight the other audit areas, some of which we mentioned already, revenue recognition, long-term debt, capital assets, including depreciation and investments. Some of our risk assessment was around the size of the accounts, volume of activity in the accounts, and the nature of the disclosures. And again, just to highlight for each of these areas, among others that we also do work over, we will be gaining that understanding of the impact of COVID on how that process operates and any of the financial results and the audit as a whole. And then the next slide here, quickly touching upon the involvement of others in our audit. KPMG engages a number of subject matter professionals. Quickly highlighting a few, KPMG National Pricing Desk, which helps with the valuation of investments. We use an actuarial specialist to review the NIPA and OPEB valuation. A tax specialist to review financial statements, determine the appropriateness of the tax exempt status. And we use a forensics team to help us identify fraud risk and fraud risk factors that are present at NIPA. And then last item here is NIPA internal audit. We will be, I guess, this month, conducting some inquiries of internal audit, reviewing their audit plan, and we obtain their audit reports that they submit throughout the year, and we will be reviewing those, looking for any significant matters or results that could have a potential impact on our audit.
Chris,
and moving to the next. Yeah.
Chris, have your brainstorming sessions resulted in any fraud risk or fraud risk factors that we should be concerned about?
Not at the moment. We've had a few discussions with them, and we are actually later this week conducting our full and final brainstorming session with them. So we can definitely provide an update if anything comes up at that point. But nothing major to note at this point.
And nothing in terms of control environment overall with COVID and the COVID ramifications you referenced earlier. Nothing that you've noted to date that is giving you or should give us any pause.
Nothing that I've seen or noted.
Okay.
Chris, one question I had, and I'm glad the chair asked about whether you'd seen any kind of, delay in your ability. I get it. Our year, you don't do your report until March of next year, but any delay on your timeline that was created by COVID, and I take it your answer is no. You've been able to continue to function remotely to do the work according to your timeline, so that's good. The other question I had is your comment about internal audit. So you're reviewing, sort of the results of the audits done by internal audit. Can you tell me, are you able to rely on work, and to what extent you're able to rely on work that's done by internal audit that, that touch on, obviously financial controls? Because it's always a question of, how much and realizing that you have to do an independent assessment, but are you able to, do we have the quality of work and internal audit for you to be able to utilize as you do your independent audit and assessment?
Yeah, I mean, Scott, I'll let you give your insight, but first, I mean, I think it's a possibility in audit, but at this point, we don't really use them in an assistance role. It's more of just getting an understanding of what's going on at the entity and anything that they're concerned about that we should be concerned about. But Scott, I'll let you add to that if you.
Yeah. I mean, I would add it's at this point what we've typically done, and because I guess there's a couple of reasons. One, we don't ultimately opine on the controls. We understand them for the audit, but we're not ultimately opining, and in many cases not necessarily doing a full test of the controls. But at this point, what we've traditionally done is read the reports. If there's anything concerning in the reports, try to understand what those are. In addition, we usually will meet with internal audit to get their take, their perspective on those reports. To the extent there is something that maybe raises eyebrows, I'll use those ranges from a financial, to your point, not more the financial impacts. We may or may not, depending what it is, address it, understand it, and then in some cases may alter our ultimate, like I'll call it a risk factor for level. It could cause us to say, oh, well, we need to raise the risk factor in this account because there's been some findings there, which would ultimately lead to us doing more test work, i.e. a bigger sample or perform additional procedures. So that's traditionally what we've done, and we have not gone down a path. And I don't think at this point, I'm not sure that it's always because of the scope of our work, it would necessarily pay dividends to utilize your work. And if we did that, we probably have to coordinate, their timing, their budget, their capacity to do things that would be in a direct assist role. So there'd have to be probably a handful of things to coordinate that. But at this point, that's not, I think we've determined probably not the most beneficial, just because of the nature of not necessarily doing a control audit. But it is something if there's the capacity to do, we can absolutely look into to coordinate if that's something that the internal audit and the company feels warranted and they have the bandwidth to do that. I just caution, obviously there is time to get that set up and then review and coordinate. It creates kind of a whole other process, so to speak, as well in some cases. And to be honest, that there's sometimes benefit, but there isn't. The net of that sometimes kind of washes itself out in many cases.
So just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that internal audit should assist you in doing your audit. What the question I'm trying to get at, the answer I'm trying to get at is, our internal audit is functioning. They're looking at a number of areas that you would look at. Again, focus narrowly on financial reporting. Is the work they've done make your testing easier? Is it helping you, not in a formal assistance way, but helps you do, because that's how we will measure the maturity of our internal audit. There should be some dividends that come from, a good functioning internal audit to help, as you do your testing, to be able to utilize that, but not as an assistance in you doing your independent audit. That's what I mean.
I would say, I'd say it definitely would gives us comfort when they're finding things are working and we're finding the same answer and we're not finding conflicting answers. And that's one. And so in that aspect, yes, because or if they're seeing something that maybe we've historically thought was a little more risky and there hasn't been issues when they've done it, and we kind of corroborate that may help us, reduce the risk on an ongoing basis from that aspect. And two, I think the other real benefit is if there is something, that we find, obviously that helps us identify potentially in some cases earlier. So for example, if there's a finding in the report, and I don't think we have a whole lot of this, to be honest, but if there is a finding in the report, it would enable us to maybe adjust our audit approach sooner than maybe we would have if we weren't aware of it. So in my mind, they're the two things where we probably get the benefit of that, to cooperate in many cases, and in some cases, if there is something, it maybe help us identify it sooner in the process.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, so the only remaining slide I had here was the accounting pronouncements, which are some of the GASB statements that will be applicable in the near term. So this is slide 13. I'll start in the middle with GASB statement number 87, which is the leases. And I know we discussed this with the committee last year. And just as a refresher, the statement really, it requires a recognition of a lease liability and a tangible right to use lease asset. That's the bulk of what the statement is getting at. And we've had discussions with management last year. We're continually having them around timing of the adoption and when work can be performed over that, because obviously, as we've mentioned in the past, it's a significant lift specifically determining the completeness of your lease population. So that's something we continually are working with Adam and Sandeep on. And then the other statement, GASB statement number 91, conduit debt obligations. This statement is to eliminate diversity in practice. It creates a single method of reporting conduit debt obligations on the financial statements. And it eliminates an existing option for issuers to report these obligations as their own liabilities that currently exist. Both of these 87 and 91 will be adopted by, or is planned to be adopted by NYPA in FY 2021. But we've had ongoing discussions with them and continue to have those discussions. And then the last one, GASB statement number 95, this was postponement of effective dates of authoritative guidance. This GASB statement was issued in response to COVID-19. What it does is it basically pushes back the effective date of some of these GASB statements by 1 year. And this statement did push back both 87 and 91, which I mentioned just before, that it pushed those back by 1 year. And then the rest of the slides within our slide deck are just required communications, talking about shared responsibilities between us and management regarding independence.
Hey, Chris. Or Adam, I mean, the conduit debt, quick education as to the applicability to us. What conduit debt do we have?
So as we've discussed in prior meetings, the goal to finance the energy efficiency loans,
Yep.
utilize the conduit debt facility, whereby we'll be issuing securities into the marketplace backed by the obligations of our customers. We've had discussions with KPMG that the way we have assumed it would work, we haven't executed it yet, and we're in the process of actually putting that together now. That would constitute a conduit debt obligation that would not be on our balance sheet. It would meet the needs it would meet the statement of 91 as far as that particular treatment. The issue of the statement was that some entities had an option in the past to choose whether it was off or on. This new statement is going to look at the transactions, and you won't have an option. It either hunts or it doesn't. So right. That's where the statement is going. We believe the conduit debt financing for the energy efficiency loans meets the conduit test.
Okay. So that's a new issuance as opposed to anything we currently have.
Right. There's nothing we currently have that would fall in the conduit area.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so just wrapping up, the last few slides are required communications regarding independence, responsibilities for the audit, and inquiries we'll be performing throughout the audit. So that's it for our presentation. I think we'll be happy to answer any other questions at this point.
Anybody have any questions for KPMG?
I'm good at this point.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, would you like us to stay on or drop?
I don't think we need a separate meeting or a private executive session with KPMG at this point, Judge, unless you or KPMG differ. We can do that at the back end come March, April, upon the conclusion of the audit, but it doesn't sound as though there's any issues or any concerns that we need to address other than what's already been put on the table.
That's what we usually do, and I don't see no reason to deviate.
Nothing you have for us, Scott?
No, John, I agree. I mean, unless you would like one, I think doing one at the end of the March meeting at this point where we're at, it would be appropriate.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
No motions required on this portion of the agenda. Next item is the consent agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott, Chris.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Have a good holiday.
Bye. You too.
So,
The approval of the joint minutes of the regular meeting on July 16th, 2020. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. Next meeting will be determined by the audit committee. If not, I'll ask for a motion to close this meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. The meeting's adjourned. We're going to take a recess, Mr. Chairman.
I think we're teed up for 10 o'clock.
Got 15 minutes.
Yeah, that works. I think that probably gives everybody sufficient time. So we'll come back, Danielle, at 10 o'clock.